1988, the case of Lois E. Jensen versus Eveleth Taconite Company was filed by Lois Jensen and other female workers of the Evtak mine in Eveleth, Minnesota. Lois Jensen was a single mom on welfare who decided to enter the field of mining to financially best take care of herself and her family. Many of the workers didn't believe Lois and the other women should have been in mining work. Yet staying on welfare was not an option either. The women received non-stop harassment at their workplace. First, Lois and the women decided not to say anything or say very much because they were too afraid that they would lose their jobs. When the harassment became so unbearable, they complained, and the company did nothing. In 1984, Lois filed a formal complaint. After doing so, her car was vandalized. The company was ordered to pay Lois $11,000, but the company rebuffed the order. Through one of the trials, a retired judge was assigned to oversee the amount of money each woman would receive in damages. He wasn't a judge who found this harassment as problematic and was known to have even taken part in harassment himself. He created a system to address the awarding of money. This system required that each woman had their lives picked apart, including their medical records. Swimming against the current of the justice system was grueling to the women, yet they remained determined. From her harassment, Lois was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. All in all, the women endured 3 trials. Eventually, after 14 years, in 1998, the women settled with Eveleth for $3.5 million for their unjust treatment. While they encountered an unjust judge through the process, their unjust judge was not the final word. A judge viewing the case through the lens of justice was the one who gave the final word. Don LeBlay, the judge, stated, "The emotional harm brought about by this record of human indecency sought to destroy the human psyche as well as the human spirit of each plaintiff. The humiliation and degradation suffered by these women is irreparable. Although money damage cannot make these women whole or even begin to repair the injury done, it can serve to set a precedent that in the environment of the working place, such hostility will not be tolerated." It became the first harassment suit of this type to be given a class action status. Some of you may be familiar with the story as it was featured in the 2005 movie, North Country. As we see in this case and in many other cases, we live in a world where people are harassed and bullied in schools and in workplaces for a variety of reasons. Humans are given different pay scales because of gender or race. In many cases, people are afraid to stand up for their own rights or the rights of those they care about because it may mean that their quality of life may further decrease. The systems are often broken, and trying to find justice in a broken system takes incredible amounts of courage in the face of tremendous risk. Because of these broken systems and failed attempts at justice, people often lose heart and hope. Their lives are marred because the system and our society has failed them again and again. Yet in the story of Lois Jensen and in today's parable, we see the persistence of voices crying out against unfairness. Throughout the parable we read today in Luke 18, justice takes a front seat. In fact, justice is such an important part of the story that Jesus uses the word 4 times within the 8 verses. In looking at this Lucan account, it is also necessary to understand the roles of the judges and widows. According to the New Interpreter's Commentary on Luke, in ancient Israel, the duty of a judge was to maintain harmonious relations and adjudicate disputes between Israelites. Widows were deprived of the support of a husband, yet they could not inherit their husband's estate, which passed on to the deceased responsibility of hearing complaints fairly and impartially, a duty that was all the more important because they adjudicated cases without the benefit of a jury. Also, according to the New Testament, widows held a place of honor, and that the church was to take care of them. In her book, The Parables of Jesus, Louise Schottroff asserts that this parable needs to be viewed through the lens of the Torah. She states, in the Torah, widows and orphans are placed under the special protection of divine law. In the patriarchal societies of the ancient world, they were structurally the first victims of economic and social injustice and of legal maneuverings, and they were the objects of treachery and attempts at exploitation. This parable in Luke 18 refers to the mandate from the Torah to take care of the widows and orphans. Deuteronomy 27:19 states, "Cursed be anyone who deprives the alien, the orphan, and the widow of justice." All the people shall say, Amen. Therefore, it was part of Jewish law to make sure these groups of people were taken care of. Schottroff continues, the injustice done to this widow is on two levels. She has been victimized by a man who has infringed on the economic basis of her life, and against whom she seeks to defend herself with the aid of a judge. She accuses him before the court. In the parable, he appears as the opponent. But in addition, she becomes the victim of an unjust judicial decision that has no regard for her rights. The judge has repulsed her many times, as the parable says. The twofold injustice done to this woman is the object of the Hebrew Bible's continued lament against the perpetrators of injustice and the people in whose midst such injustice occurs. Schottroff says, the widow's resistance to the twofold injustice done to her and to many other widows consists in her going to court on the account of infringement on her livelihood and not allowing herself to be put off by the unjust judge. Like this widow, who is dealing with twofold injustice from the opponent and the judge, Lois Jensen and the women who worked for Eveleth Mines were dealing with twofold injustice as well. They had been harassed in the workplace and been oppressed by the judicial system. We have two stories, one a parable from the 1st century and the other a real-life account from the 20th century. Yet both these stories, a verdict from an unjust judge was not the final word. God still spoke and justice prevailed. I believe that by looking at the story in Luke, we see God as the type of judge which contrasts the unfair judge. And we also see the presence of God and the voice of the widow. As I mentioned, people in all areas of our society, in our schools, in our workplaces, in organizations, are harassed, bullied, and treated unfairly for so many reasons. Maybe some of you have been harassed. In some of those cases, we find people who will be the best judges in our lives to help us through these times. And there may have been times when it felt as if the just judge was absent and you had to walk alone. God continues to speak to our society through the voices of justice, like the widow in Luke and Lois Jensen. Even when our society is like the unjust judge, God continues to tug at the heart of the unjust by persistent voices in need. As a child, I was quite often teased by the other kids in school, mostly because I was the shortest kid in the class and my faith was somewhat different than theirs. There were times I felt so discouraged, yet I had this great teacher, Mrs. Techmusian, who made herself available to talk with me. When I felt as if I had been shrunk to nothing, she reminded me again and again of my self-worth. Even when there were voices of oppression in every single crevice of society, there are just judges, there are teachers, there are pastors and leaders who are willing to listen and lift us up. If some of you are bullied, threatened, or harassed in any capacity, do not give up. Do not let others who hold on to injustice threaten you or shame you. and the source of steadfast love. Because God is calling creation to justice, there are people in this world who are willing to listen to you and to love you unconditionally. In the name of Christ, we love you unconditionally, and we are here to listen to you. Your voice is a valuable voice, and please allow your voice to be heard. Like the widow or Lois Jensen, you may be harassed and unable to find a just judge. Even if there are people harassing you and the judges you find are unjust, keep plugging. There are plenty of just judges in our society. With persistence, we will find the justice we need. Through the gift of this parable, Jesus is trying to reach out to those in his time and continues to reach us today. Do not lose heart. Allow your authentic voice of justice to ring. Be persistent and do not give up. Each one of you is made in the image